Everyone tells us to avoid cramming, but the reality is that most of us don't study for the exams months in advance. Most of us just leave it for a few days before. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Zain and I'm a medical student at the University of Manchester. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how I crammed effectively in the past for my school tests, assessments, and even some of my university exams in 3 days and still ended up scoring top grades. 3 days is a limited amount of time, so you need to prioritize revising your weak topics and the most common topics that show up on the exam. Don't make the mistake of studying stuff in chronological order and then waste time doing stuff you already know. Spend a good 2 hours skimming over everything that you need to know for that exam and then make a list of specific weak concepts that you're confused about. Not big topics, specific weak concepts. Don't just put organic chemistry on that list. Put the SN1 reaction. This list of topics is your red list. This is the list that you need to focus on studying first. I have my exam in a couple days too, so I made my red list and I literally ended up with 40-50 concepts on there. So don't be overwhelmed if you do as well. Simply split those 50 concepts into the 3 days or however many days you have before your exam and get on with it. Now that you have your red list, how do you efficiently learn and understand all this content in time for your exam? This is my simple 3-step strategy for revision during the 3 days. I know we're all used to half copying the textbook, calling them notes, and then telling ourselves we'll come back to it later. But it makes no sense and we don't have time for that. I start by doing practice questions before I've even touched the content. I treat it as a starter, so I spend the first hour or two of every revision session attempting 30 multiple choice questions or 15 maths questions or 3 essay plans. I know this isn't easy because we aren't really taught to do questions before we study, but by treating the simple 1 hour of practice as a starter, you not only will make the actual studying you're doing later on more effective, but you'll also familiarize yourself with all the question types and you'll know exactly what you're being assessed on for the exam. Now I understand that if your content is really difficult or impossible to just have a go at, then the next best thing for you to do is to find model answers or solutions to the practice questions that you're solving and figure out the method that they use to get to their answer. And of course, as you cycle through the questions, always keep track of the topics that you're struggling with on that red list. After I've done this hour of question solving, I now attack the topics on my red list head on. Let's say you have to do 15 out of 50 concepts today. You should go through each one of them and review them. Focus on the understanding, not the memorizing. For example, let's say the topic was inflammation, its main stages, the mediators involved. The first thing that I do is I spend 20 to 30 minutes going through the lecture slides and my pre-made notes, figuring out the information that I need to know, and then reading and reviewing it. I Google search to fill the gaps in my knowledge or maybe watch an animation video, but the key thing that I'd be doing throughout all of this is I'd be focusing on understanding this big concept and then simplifying it in my head. Because these are supposed to be really high yield revision sessions, I'd also focus on quizzing and testing myself while I learn. This means that once I've grasped that basic understanding of the topic, I'd go try a few questions on QuizMed or try explaining that topic to myself out loud as if I was teaching a child. These days, I usually just test myself on the recall questions that I created back in term time, but if you are starting from scratch with your revision and you have nothing prepared for these 3 days, then the whole point of understanding that concept and then quizzing yourself afterwards is essential because it not only accelerates the actual learning that you're doing, but it also immediately tells you whether you understood something or didn't. The last step of my study session is something called active blurting. Essentially, this means writing out or blurting all the information that I've just learned about that topic on a single blank piece of paper. Usually, I prefer making a mind map to organize the information for this topic. So I have the main topic in the middle, I have subheadings surrounding it, and then underneath the subheadings, I have all the information. It's simply another way of testing yourself and verifying that you understand all the knowledge of that topic really well. Because you only have 3 days, you're not going to be able to go through each topic that many times. So the best solution that I found was that I would maximize the studying and the types of ways I would study for that topic in that one study session. And I know how you feel. This is the last hour of your study session. You've done all this work to cover the concept so far, but because you only have 3 days to do this, you can't afford to forget what you've just learned. So I do suggest to make this last effort, do the active blurting, solidify what you've learned, and make sure you remember and retain everything that you just studied. An hour of starter questions, several hours of understanding the concepts on your red list, and finally active blurting that topic and what you've learned from it. All of these things make a very strong study session that is essential for those 3 days of revision. On the last day, I have 2 big aims. First is to get through a ton of practice questions for at least 3 to 4 hours and to make sure that I'm fully analyzing my answers. Really focus on where you're going wrong and what types of questions are leading you to make mistakes. Focus on the mark scheme if you have it. It's easier to do with things like MCQs because you can really hone in on the topics that you are not good at answering. But for the more problem-based exams or the essay-based exams, there's more of a methodology behind it. So figure out where you're lacking and the specific phrases or specific bits of the answer that you're missing out on. Learning from these mistakes is essential at this point because it's the last day. The second big aim of mine on that last day is to go through every single topic on my red list. I spent at least another 4 to 5 hours figuring out all the concepts that I don't understand, focusing on my red list weak topics, and then doing recall questions for them, testing myself, basically building in that basis, filling in those knowledge gaps, and making sure that I'm solid with everything. But the key here is to not focus on the depth of a single topic, but instead focus on the breadth of multiple ones. You need to be smart and critical with the way you're revising now. These are a couple ways that I'm tactical about the ways I revise. Firstly, I always watch things on 1.5x or 2x speed, whether it's lectures or YouTube videos. I'm focusing on understanding this content quickly, not focusing on things like making notes or making questions right now. So I don't need it on that one-time speed. I can very easily listen to that 1.5x or 2x speed, and I think you can as well. Point is, things like slow videos, reading and rereading your text, all of this stuff is really inefficient and you need to find better ways that facilitate your learning. Second, you need the information to be delivered to you in a concise and clever way. So pick 2 to 3 high-value resources and stick to them. If you're a few days before your exam and you have nothing to revise with other than your textbook, then I'd really suggest spending an hour or two finding the best resources for that exam. Look at revision guides for that subject. Ask your friend for notes. I don't know, find a good YouTube channel. The book you use and the way you consume the content for that exam really dictates how fast you are with your revision. It'll literally impact what you know for that exam, and it matters a lot more than you think. Lastly, you'll end up having a very decent idea of the common topics for that exam, so give those common topics a lot more attention. Have the ability to ignore the unimportant details of a topic and focus on gaining that bird's eye view of the main concepts. Have them mapped out in your head. That's what separates the people that get through all the content quickly a few days before the exams versus the people that get stuck on something and then only end up doing half of it. You may feel a little unprepared in the 3 days leading up to that exam, especially because you're doing so much revision, you're going through so much content so quickly. It's normal to feel like nothing actually went in, but be confident with what you've done. You've done so much in 3 days, tackled all your weak concepts, spent hours testing yourself. And if you followed the method, you've done all these small things like practice questions every day, doing active blurting for all your main topics. And because you've done all these small things, they'll all accumulate and will really benefit you during that exam that you're sitting. You've done everything you could to catch up and squeeze in as much revision into that small amount of time that you had. So walk into the exam room with confidence and smash it. If you found this helpful, here I show you how I quickly catch up on my work when I've fallen behind in classes, and here is a playlist of all the specific strategies that I use to study for my exams. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.